Hey, follow me. Today we're going to talk about function versus aesthetics. People get confused about go muscles versus show muscles. So we're going to dive into it with some real intelligent friends of mine. Come on.
Hey guys, today we're going to talk about training for function versus training for aesthetics. Training for aesthetics is basically to look a certain way. Training for function is whenever you take what we do in here and move that to your job function outside. I've got Coach G with me. We're going to go over a few things to help you guys out.
Great. So when it comes to training for aesthetics, it's important to keep in mind what the goal is. Now, we have to respect specificity, that the things that make us look good may not make us work good, for lack of a better term. We also have to keep in mind Goodhart's law. What's the most important thing? And any measure ceases to be a good measure when it becomes a target. So if my target is get fucking jacked and tan, which is awesome, right? That's great. That's the American way. That may not align with the reality of my job, right? So let's use overhead press as an example. So, or an incline bench, I should say. Whichever, it doesn't fucking matter, okay? So with an incline bench, go ahead and start pressing, okay? Bodybuilding, the goal is improving and increasing cross-sectional mass. So for example, in this bench press, increasing the size of his chest. Now, the way Nolan is pressing, you see he's got this 45-degree angle in his hands. That's actually leaning more towards function. We're respecting the interaction between the spine and the shoulder, the elbow, the radius, etc. Okay? Bodybuilding, if we want to bias the pec, see, I don't even have to fucking ask for it, you know. Okay? Here we're biasing the pec. That's not bad. You might hear people say, never do that, but it's totally fine, especially if your goal is fucking get a jacked chest and it's Monday. It's the United States of America, you got a fucking bench. Okay? So anyway, turn those dumbbells in, you'll get more of an angle that better respects the shoulder. You may not get cross-sectional mass, but you'll get better function. Even better than this, however, is the Landmine. Again, if function is your goal. Okay, so Landmine, great for function, but I think everybody understands maybe not the best for increasing cross-sectional mass or, again, getting swole. So, for example, here, go ahead and press. Isn't this very similar to what we were doing over there, right, with the incline bench press? Now, if we want to get into an overhead position, which is great for lat lengthening, you'll press as an incline and then lean forward. So, or you lean forward like that, both work. So why don't you try this? Try, let's say, away and then shift forward. Okay? You're not going to get fucking jacked in a landmine press. You will respect the function of your shoulder if you turn to this as a tool. Okay? It's important to remember, okay, what's the most important thing? Is it about size or is it about function? Both are correct, but I also want to bring this up. When it comes to things like bodybuilding, powerlifting, and Olympic weightlifting, those aren't real. We know exactly when the meets are coming up. We know exactly what our PR should be to be competitive. We know what time the event is and what poses we're going to use. That's not the real world. Nolan, can you tell me about some observations that you've seen as far as your community goes and people who have gone too far down the bodybuilding or let's just say other vectors path, like people who are too big or too soft or too skinny?
So we've actually had a couple guys that I know of that prep for bodybuilding competitions and they eat as if they're going to be going on stage sometime soon, and sometimes that time frame really draws out. So they can't just take off work during that whole prep cycle. So they get very lean, they get very dehydrated, trying to work up for that show, and they're really not ready to go out into the real world, pull on a full set of turnout gear, throw on a pack, and do a lot of work for several hours at a time. So they kind of put themselves at a disadvantage when they do that. Once they get out of those cycles and kind of gain a little bit of body fat percentage back, they're great. So they have that energy store if they need it. And if they don't, you know, they're not over fat, they're just kind of somewhere in the middle.
So where my head goes for that is like, if you're trying to identify whether or not you're in an optimal shape or position, as far as your whole body goes, how do you stack up amongst your peers? Are you typically at the back of the pack? Are you struggling to do basic things that no one else is struggling with? That might be an indication that maybe you're too focused on a goal that's competing with what your actual job is. In Phoenix, Arizona, it's not uncommon for out-of-towners to get stuck on Camelback Mountain. And it's not so much the person on the mountain that I'm concerned about. It's the firefighters that have to go up there 3, 4, 5 times a day when it's 110 degrees outside. I mean, if I was a firefighter and working on a competition, I can't imagine doing that and being on the mountain for 4 to 6 hours at a time. That's wild.
All right, Coach G. So if we're talking about function versus aesthetics, like what's a good summary for people to take away?
Well, I would say if you know that you have a very random, chaotic job or a high-risk occupation, you have to recognize when your dwell times are, and maybe that's where you start to get a little more specific with bodybuilding and things like that. But also respect what's the most important thing, and just have that always in the back of your mind. And as long as you keep that in mind, then hopefully you have a longer, more productive, and healthier career.
So an easy way to kind of balance that out is you can go to this Athlete app, follow the nutrition program, follow the training teams. That'll put you in a great spot. We're not trying to cut you down to a show-ready bodybuilder position. We're trying to make you a more functional, tactical athlete.